to introduce you to some of the tools. So I have a few slides, but I find sometimes it's also helpful to have sort of a live demonstration so that we can run into bumps and hiccups along the way and see where we go from that. So there's my email. I know many of you probably know my colleague Amy Boutros, and so she's trying to come up to speed on some of these newer things with ORCiD and NSF. Amy is still a great contact, and if she can't answer your questions, she can always bump you over to me, or you can reach out to me directly. So the ORCiD and NSF, it's a relatively new policy where NSF is, at first they were requiring, and now it's more of they're recommending that people use the SciENcv platform to create their biosketch. And they're also recommending that you tie it to an ORCiD account. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what an ORCiD account is, but there are some great efficiencies that you can get by using ORCiD for your NSF. And so ORCiD, it is an independent nonprofit organization. The name of it is Open Researcher and Contributor Identifiers. And basically, it's a growing system to try and disambiguate different researchers who might have similar names, and also an easier way to get a corpus of somebody's work. If it's all tagged with a unique identifier, it's a little bit easier to get somebody's work in a large collection of articles, books, conference proceedings, whatever you'd like to put onto your ORCiD account. And it is online, and you get to choose what is made publicly available and what is kept private just for you. And the bullet points here are to give you the matchup between what NSF is looking for and what ORCiD sections there are. So on your NSF form, you're going to have your section for professional preparation. Well, that's your education. And ORCiD gives a spot for you to put your education in, so you don't have to type it every time into the form. Your appointments are your employment details, and ORCiD gives you a place to put all of those, your products or your works. And the nice thing with ORCiD is that you can easily import that information so that you don't have to retype that information. And your synergistic activities, well, that's your biography statement, and ORCiD gives you a place to have that too. All right, so why ORCiD, or what is ORCiD sort of offering to us now? And ORCiD is used, and this is probably a little bit of an older statistics, it is used by over 7,000 journals, meaning that the publishers are asking you for at least one author to have an ORCiD number. It is integrated into many systems, not only by the publishers, but also here at UCSD. And we're hoping to build that out so that your promotion and tenure process is a little bit more point and click, instead of trying to create a CV and get all of those details in a more labor-intensive way. So stay tuned for good news on that front, hopefully. And as I mentioned, it can automate the adding of your publications. And you can add them by this point and click system. You can add them manually, which means that even if you have something that is not sort of publicly findable on the web, you can still add it. So some people will add presentations that may not be in a conference proceeding, just so you can keep track of them and actually use ORCiD as an online CV. And as I mentioned, it is a way to distinguish your research from another researcher's work if they have a similar name. So before we kind of talk about ORCiD and setting up an account, I wanted to go over just a couple of best practices and tips. It is important to, once you land on the ORCiD page, to see if an account already exists for you, if you're going there to create an account. And partly I picked this up from my colleague who does this quite a bit, and what she has found is that sometimes journals will want an ORCiD and they didn't bother to work with the author, and they just sign them up for an ORCiD just to have an ID. And so sometimes there might be something out there for you. I find sometimes people can't remember if they signed up or not. And so there might actually be an account out there. So which email should you use? And this is kind of an important one. If you are here at UCSD and you have really no intention of leaving, use your UCSD email. But if you're an early career researcher, you might want to go with a personal email, like a Gmail account, because it's a little easier to get your password reminder if you have moved on to another institution. You can have multiple emails in your ORCiD account. So it's not that you're losing your institutional affiliation. So you can still have your UCSD email on the account so that people can see it. It just means that for managing the account, it's a little bit easier if you think you're going to be a little bit more mobile. There is something in ORCiD called trusted organizations. And these are ways to pull in that information, and also you authorize your trusted organizations so that your information flow is enabled. And so you'll see that when you set up so trusted organizations, you'll see that when you are trying to connect the SciENcv Biosketch with an ORCiD account. It'll ask you if you want to authorize that. But there are some article finding tools, and we'll see a list of these in just a minute. And these are tools that go out and look to see if you have some publications that can be added to your account. NSF is not as advanced as NIH is with the funding information, but there are some funding tools. I'm not sure why I have NSF here, but because it's not in there yet. But there's something that's called Dimensions, which actually goes out and crawls some of the public funding sites and keeps track of that. So instead of having to retype your information, you can pull that in as well. This is the registration screen for ORCiD. That's all the information you have to type in. So it really is quite easy to do, and ORCiD.org is where you need to go. And so it took me a while to not have an H in there, like the flower. I had to learn to drop that H. So let's head out and go to ORCiD, and we'll see what that's like. So I already have it here, ORCiD.org. So this is your landing page. And it's a very messy thing. So I'll just put in my name. And there's all these crazy Karens that are here. Some have an affiliation, some don't. If you have a close match like this one, this is my profile. So you can just eyeball quickly and easily if there's an account for you already with your affiliation. Otherwise, don't worry about it. Just create one. And you do want to leave it on this for researchers part, so you can sign in or register as you need to. And I'll just go ahead and sign in real quickly. And if you do have questions as we go along, let me know. So I'm going to show you my profile if the internet works here. All right, so I have a very short biography. And again, that is something that gets pulled right into the form. Couple of things about employment. So mine looks very different than most of you PIs because you will have a lot more here. You might have some invited positions, more memberships and services that you're doing, and definitely a lot more funding. And if you need to add funding, you do search and link. And you can, here's Dimensions Wizard. You just add that. And it will, I'm not going to click on it because it won't be worthwhile since I have none. And so you easily click and add things. So I'll do that with add work. So I'll do search and link. And I already connected European PMC. So I'm just going to click on that. And it should show me a list of things. So this is one that is mine. So I will go ahead and select that and continue. And it confirms for me that that's been added. And there's another one down here, Scopus. Now, we don't have Scopus, but you can still connect to that and use their information. And so this is what you get when you are being asked to enable that trusted organization. So you either authorize or deny. All right, so with Scopus, it's going to find you. So you have a couple of extra steps to do, and we'll just go through those. And so we can see here the ones that, so they want to find all of these. These are all of the ones they found for me. And so they've already pre-selected them. And let's see, I think these are already in. So I'm just going to deselect them. And then I'll go next. And so they want me to confirm that. So it's not quite as seamless as the other one. Oh, they want me to do the Scopus profile. That's annoying. Okay. All right. So I already authorized that. And okay. So I haven't done Scopus because I wanted you to see the authorize, but they changed it since the last time. So it's, okay. So I had to get all the way here to send publications. So you kind of have to walk through their process, which is a whole lot more cumbersome than it used to be. But as you can see here, European PubMed Central was really, really simple. So as the name sounds, it was very much like PMC or PubMed. Do you all use PubMed? Is that a tool?
I think it's mostly for NIH that they use PubMed.
Okay. It does a broad variety of things. So I think the databases you use are probably a little bit different. And so there's some, what you may want to add to this is the cross-ref metadata search, because this is not subject specific. This collects a lot of cross-disciplinary articles. If you are, what I found with this new one is it includes a lot of different things, and it pays a little attention to Chinese articles. So if you're working in a cross-disciplinary way with that. And so once you have your list, what you need to pay attention to are these settings here. I've set most of my stuff so that everyone can see it. You can do a step down and do just trusted parties so that the things that you connect to can still see it, or you can leave this whole thing completely private for only me. So that was a quick view of that. I did get a question, is it possible that I have more than one ORCiD account? And yes, it's quite possible. And so you can, probably the best way to try and deal with that, if you think that's possible, is to go back to the article that you published, find out what your ORCiD ID is. And ORCiD does have a way for you to merge the accounts so that you will only have one account. So that is something that you can do. I do have, my colleagues and I do have a guide, and probably the easiest way to get to it instead of trying to remember this is simply UCSD ORCiD. Just Google that and you'll get to this guide. And so we have some details on that. And so that would be a good thing for you all to know about. Any other questions about ORCiD? Did I make, I know I went through that very, very quickly. But I did want you to see how easy it is to add citations to your works.
Is there any plan that, that things like Web of Science are going to be integrated?
Yes. So let me see. I was surprised I didn't see that there. On some of my things, it doesn't usually say Web of Science, but it says Researcher ID. And that's Web of Science. And so let's see, why didn't I see, I'm not sure why I didn't see that in the list. I'll have to go back to that and find out where that one went to, because that one slipped my mind as I was preparing this. Any other questions? We only have a few more minutes, so I did want to just cover a couple of other things real quickly. And starting with this question that I get sometimes, which is, if I have a Google Scholar, why isn't that enough? And the problem with Google Scholar is it doesn't connect with other systems. But if you have put some energy into Google Scholar, you can actually extract all of that information and pull it right into ORCiD so that you don't even have to worry about clicking on the different things. You can populate that right away. So we took a quick look at the profile. And so why should you connect it to SciENcv? It's the autofilling of 3 sections, 3 of the 4 sections. And the 4th section, it doesn't autofill, but it gives you a list that you get to choose. And the nice thing is that it's not, once it's entered, it is not locked to where it comes from, so that in the form, it is completely editable. So if you find a mistake, somehow it didn't come in quite right and you need to fix that, or maybe for the bibliography section, you have a stem of what your research interest is, or maybe you want to highlight a particular one for a biosketch. You put in what you've got and then you edit from there. So it's a really nice, efficient way to do things. So the editing is there. There is a 2-page limit, I understand, with the NSF biosketches, and so it will help you figure that page limit out. And it is reusable information. So if you have a grant that is similar, or a biosketch that you need and is similar to one you've already created, just base your new one off of your old one, and that information is automatically populated. And the last thing is that, and apparently from my contact in Research Services Corps, this is a problem when the biosketch is not on the right form. And so you don't have to worry about, do I have the right number? It will always print out the information on the correct biosketch form. All right, so again, SciENcv, I would just Google SciENcv to get to it, because this is really a long URL to type in. You do have options, so you can make this a little bit more efficient. You can actually sign in with your NSF login. Very easy to do, or since you're not PubMed users, you don't have to worry about that. And so let's go look at SciENcv real quickly. So just Google for it and it'll come up. And we'll click there in the middle to start that off. Let me make this bigger. So I'm going to use my NCBI login. And when you first get in here, you should probably do this little mini profile. And this is where you can connect your ORCiD for the entire account. And you can also add an NSF ID right here. And you can put in here anything that you would like to put in. They're just empty fields, and you can save that. And so that gets pushed to your NSF form. So let's create a new document. So I'm going to do NSF Biosketch, and I'm going to do an external source, and we're going to pull it right from ORCiD. Oops, it wants a name. All right. So while my internet thinks about it for a minute, it is populating the form. So I get my little bit of detail here. So automatically my name is here, my ORCiD is here. Education is here as well. If I need to add more, I can certainly do that. And this is the way the form is most of the time. They're just blank options, so you can add in anything that needs to be added. Here are my employment details. So it pulled that in automatically. Again, just add whatever you need to add or edit them. So I can come in here and change this. So maybe I want to do just librarian. So I'll go ahead and save that. And then your synergistic activities, this is where your biography shows up. And again, edit what you need to or add more information. And then your products is where you get a lot of point and click options. So I'm going to flip over to ORCiD. So my bibliography, since you're not PubMed users, this is coming from PubMed. So you can ignore that one and just click on ORCiD and then select the ones that you want. Save those citations and then add some other ones. And so we'll do this one and I'll do that one. And save that. So with just a couple of point and clicks, I was able to add in the works that I felt were most important for this application. So if I have this the way I need it to be, let me click download PDF. Now I know this was rather quick. If you're doing a biosketch, I'm sure you'd add a little bit more thought into what's going on there. So let me open this up. And so there's that. Now we did have a question. Is the PDF from this form still limited to the 2 pages? Yes. So if I had a huge biography section where I was explaining my expertise, it would probably let me know that I was approaching a 2-page limit. But this is then something you can download and save and then send off to whatever funding organization you need to. So if there is a long list of publishers, oh, that's a really good question. That I don't know where it truncates. Now, you know what I'm missing from products is I've been so focused on showing you the point and click that I didn't notice there wasn't an edit or add item. So let me flip over. Oh, here we go. So under my bibliography, let's see if this is limited to PubMed. Yeah. So this is going to search PubMed. So if you're going to use SciENcv, you really need your articles that you want to cite in ORCiD in order to select them and add them to this list, because it looks like there's no way to manually enter that citation here. But with, let's see, I have a feeling that with, I'll double check and see. I'll find some articles that have really long, maybe I'll go into PubMed with some physics stuff because they like to have like 500 authors and see where they truncate. I have a feeling that they might truncate somewhere around 7 authors before they do an et al. Oh, and so Anne says that NSF does not allow an et al. In the cited reference section, but in the biographical sketch, it should do that. So let me do some investigating. Let me give myself a note. And what I'll do is I'll add these into the slide deck so we can sort of keep track of some of these questions. So that was really quick into using SciENcv. If I go back to my main list here, here's the one that we just did. If you need to edit any of these or delete them, it's very simple to delete them. You just bomb them out and create new. You also have the option to work with the current and pending. And with this, they don't give me too many options for pulling information in. They kind of give you just a blank form. And since I don't often do these parts of the form, there's not a lot of detail I can give you on this other than showing you that this part of the form, you're not really pulling in from ORCiD, you're not pulling in from a lot of different places. You're just putting in the pieces of detail that you need, however many you need, and then you can start to get that form going and create that PDF. So you've got your download PDF down here. It did grab my name though, so it did that. All right, questions, because we're going to keep this about half an hour. Other questions that you might have? All right, it sounds like there's no questions at this point in time. As I said, I will be following up with the 2 questions that we had, and I will follow up with Jeff to get the slides and get this presentation uploaded where it makes the most sense for you. I will say, if there's no other questions, we'll go ahead and call that a wrap, and let me know or reach out to Amy Boutros with any questions that you have. I'll go ahead and sure.
Thank you, Karen.
Oh, you're very welcome.
In following up on the questions asked during the session, there's a bit more information to share with everyone. One of the questions was about connecting to Web of Science and making articles in Web of Science available in ORCiD, and exactly how would you do that? Well, Web of Science used to have their researcher ID, but it has switched to their Publons platform. If you have had a Web of Science account previously, that will work to sign into Publons. And if you don't have an ID for it, it's simple to create one. The easiest way to get there is by using the Web of Science database. The link to Publons is at the top of the search page. To connect to ORCiD, the process starts with Publons, which is a bit different than we saw earlier in the video, where we started with ORCiD itself. To get things started, once you are at Publons, you are looking at your dashboard, and on the left side navigation under Settings, choose Permissions, and then scroll down to the ORCiD settings to tick one or perhaps both of the boxes. The first box keeps Publons up to date with ORCiD, and the second will push anything you add to Publons to ORCiD. So that's the one that's really key if you want things to go from Publons to ORCiD. Be sure to scroll down and click Save Changes. There's a box down below that you need to click. One last step, if you already have items on your Publons account or the former Researcher ID account, you can use the button Export Publication to ORCiD Now to push some articles to ORCiD and update ORCiD. There are a couple of other automatic updating options that you could use. Scopus is the one I think that is the most helpful to connect with. We saw a little bit of that in the demonstration earlier. This one, connecting with Scopus, will be the least amount of work to populate and keep citations updated. Scopus has an author profile for any author appearing in its database and automatically adds articles to that profile. While we don't have a subscription to this database, your author profile is something that you can access and refine if needed. You may have 2 profiles there. I found that I did. And this happens because you published with either your middle initial, or you didn't have your middle initial when you published, or perhaps your name has changed. Well, you can actually combine them. It's not that difficult, but if you'd like some assistance with that, just reach out to me and we'll walk you through that process. Now, if manual entry is needed, it's best to not have that much typing. And if you can get a DOI for your article, that is probably going to be the most efficient way for you to add things to ORCiD. One of the questions we had during the discussion was about adding peer review activity. First of all, peer review activity cannot be manually added. So the only method I know of is to use trusted organizations, and Publons is the only one I know of that currently integrates this information from the publishers. This is actually a growing aspect of Publons, and many journals are already signed on to push information to Publons. If you check that box on the publisher site that you want the information to go into Publons. It's a simple click when turning in your peer review. Back to Publons for a quick second to finish up our peer review part. Look in the section, so down into the settings again, just below the section where you connected ORCiD and Publons. There's another section to enable for Publons and ORCiD integration, and that is to export your reviews to ORCiD. So just like we did before, click in the box. Once you have that set up and your permissions the way you want them, click Save Changes. Another question that came up is a little bit of better understanding about how it notifies an author about their biosketch and if it's more than 2 pages. And exactly how does it do that? Well, it does that when you are going to print the PDF. So it's not actively looking at how many pages you have as you're doing the biosketch. So with this step, go ahead and print it to PDF. It'll tell you, it'll give you this message here that it's over 2 pages. Click OK with that button. It's really the only option you have. And get that PDF and see how much over the 2 pages you are. And that way it'll give you an idea of how much you need to edit. All right, so the last question we had was, what does SciENcv do with the huge list of authors? Does it truncate them? And the answer is no. Actually, I grabbed a really, really plentiful number of authors and it printed the whole thing. And I think the PDF wound up being like 4 pages long, which is way too much. So there is some guidance. Fortunately, Anne found this for us. And NSF prefers to not use at all. However, it does have some comment in there that senior authors, senior personnel at their discretion can use an et al. And with SciENcv, you're not able to modify the author line. So you would need to have a workaround. Perhaps in ORCiD, maybe a separate record in ORCiD where you have this as an et al. You could mark this as something private so that it doesn't look like a strange duplicate with your public information, and be able to do your et al. And use that in your SciENcv. So this link here in the middle of the screen will take you to the guideline that we found. And that looks like the end of the questions.